Hey, this is Brighter Rays that you're watching, and today we're looking at a study called All This Has Come Against Me. We're in Genesis chapter 42, and today's study is called Fear and Humbling, and we're looking at verses 1 through 6. So if you haven't read Genesis 42 in a while, read Genesis 42, 1 through 6, and then we'll take a look at that right now. And we're going to look at fear, and then we're going to look at some humbling going on here. And as we begin our story, we are reminded of what we learned in chapter 41, that there was a famine in the land of Canaan. In 41, we were told that all the earth was really experiencing the famine. But lest we think that Canaan, the promised land, the land which we hear about Exodus, that is flowing with milk and honey, lest we think that it's exempt from the famine, we're told explicitly here by Moses that the famine was in Canaan too. It's interesting that Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob all experienced famine in the land of Canaan, right? It's the promised land. It's the land that they've been given, but yet they all experience a famine while they're in Canaan. All three are moved from their homeland, out of the homeland, to really escape the famine. So it's interesting how God does that. Here's the land that you belong in, but then I'm going to create famine there. And so it really helped them to realize, yes, this is the promised land, but this is not the ultimate promise. This is not the end of the promise. There's more to come. So they always lived in their whole lives as sojourners. But all three had to be kicked out of their homeland. All three experienced a test of faith because of the famine. And that's one of the ways that God has tested the patriarchs, is through famine, to see where their trust is, to grow their faith in Him. All three are blessed on the other side of the test. So we see that as well, that they're all blessed after they go through the test during the time of famine, as they have to leave and everything is shaken up in their lives. How would they make it on the other side? And then God blesses them. God used these famines to make the point clear to them that their homeland was not their ultimate homeland. We're told in Hebrews 11 that these three men desired a heavenly country. If the land of Canaan was all their hearts were set on, they would have had the opportunity to return if they wanted to. And so they didn't. They lived as sojourners. Even King David, who lived in the city of David, and built a palace for himself. For him, he prayed to God, saying, "For we are strangers before you and sojourners, as all our fathers were." Now, were all his fathers, sojourning in the land? Not technically, because they were all, they had houses, they owned property during the time of Judges, they were living there. The people were getting kicked out. So they were claiming the land, but yet he says all of our forefathers were sojourners, and we are today too. So David can call himself a sojourner, even though he owned property, he owned a palace, he lived in the city of David, but he was still a sojourner, because ultimately Jerusalem, ultimately Israel, was not the ultimate promise. That's not what they were set all their hopes on, like this plot of land on earth. They were expecting more. And we're told in the book of Hebrews too that they were expecting the entire earth. They were expecting to inherit the earth itself. And we're told that other places that's exactly what's going to happen. The meek shall inherit the earth, right? There you go. But that's what they were doing. So the famine is going on. There's going to be some sojourning going on. There's some fear here too. Now, there were many well-established trade routes throughout Israel that the goods going to and from Egypt would pass through. And, as reserves of grain in Canaan began to dwindle, word obviously would be being passed that, hey, there's food in Egypt. There would be caravans going through the land of Israel from Egypt that was carrying food. Like if you're getting desperate for food, it shows up on the road, you're gonna notice. That news is gonna spread like wildfire. People are gonna do that. So the social media of the day must have spread the news quickly, because that's not a secret. That's gonna be staying too long. Hey, You need food? Go to Egypt. Well, Jacob, who is a businessman after all, hears that there's grain for sale in Egypt, and he knows what must be done. His sons, on the other hand, are idle. Jacob says to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" As if they didn't know what to do. It's like, stop looking at each other, you morons. Go out and buy some food from Egypt. You know where it's coming from. Go do that. Well, as a father, this is a phrase I know too well. Stop looking at each other and get to work. Stop staring at each other. Let's go. You don't need to debate or deliberate, who's doing what or whatever. Just get it done. I don't care if all of you go or one of you goes, just do it. But Jacob says, go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die. This is obvious, boys. Let's go. Well, the brothers obey their father, and the 10 set out for Egypt. However, we are told that Benjamin, who is a young man, at this point is left behind. Now, why? Well, Jacob feared that harm might happen to him. It seems as if Jacob still favors Rachel and her children. You remember, Rachel was the one he loved. He loved her so much, almost like love at first sight. And he still has a love for his deceased wife and her children so much that he favors both Joseph, and then when Joseph's gone, Benjamin is the favored one. So sending the other 10 might not have been ideal. It wasn't the best. There's danger in there. But to send Benjamin, well, the last of beloved Rachel's children, that wouldn't happen. That's not going to happen. Benjamin would not be put in harm's way or even perceived harm's way. That's just not going to happen. So now the 10 make their way to Egypt, and they go to the governor of the land to buy the grain. Of course, the governor is Joseph, but they won't figure that out for a while now. And they do as all others do, and they come before Joseph and they bow down to him. The sheaves are bowing down to his, right? Just like the dreams that Joseph had almost 2 decades earlier, it's starting to come true now. So they'll go in, they'll bow down, and we'll see that happen again when they come back the second time. But we see that dream is starting to happen. And so you see that humbling of the brothers there. Jacob has to kind of like, what are you guys doing? Let's go. And then they have to go before their own brother, which they don't know yet, but they have to humble themselves before this foreign governor because their own land is not able to support them. So it's a humbling experience. There's fear going on with Jacob. He's afraid of what might happen to Benjamin, but not so much what would happen to the other sons. But there's some issues there. There's some things that probably shouldn't be going on. There's some fear there that, Jacob doesn't really trust God with Benjamin yet. And so I guess he's not really trusting his other sons either. He's just okay with them going, which says something about Jacob and his favoritism. But we'll come back next time, and we'll take a look at the next section 7 through 20. And we'll see what goes on next when they finally get to go before Joseph.